How's it going, everyone? Eamon and Prince here from Best Dog. Today we're going to be looking at recall training. Okay, what is recall training? Basically, it means come when called. For the purpose of the video, I want you to understand I teach recall separately to the dog's name. When I use the dog's name, I'm looking for eye contact. But when I use, say, the dog's recall word like come or here, what I'm looking for from the dog is I'm looking for the dog to come back to me and also present himself in a sit. Now we're going to look at the whole mechanics today in this tutorial. For me, recall training is one of the most important behaviors you can teach your dog. Reason for that is it works in an emergency when your dog might get out. It might be loose. If you have a really reliable recall, you're not worried about that. You're calling your dog back and your dog is coming back. Everything is safe. Also, it opens up the environment, nice place where you might bring your dog, where they can be off lead, where you are confident to let them off. And for me, this is one of the most important gifts you can give your dog, actually freedom to be a dog and enjoy nature. Sniffing is a really big important part of your dog's well-being, and by allowing them the freedom to go off into nature and sniff and investigate, they become a lot more calm when they come home and they're just a happier dog, which is what we're always aiming for. Before we get started, it's going to look something like this. So in this tutorial, we're going to be going through the steps which teach our dog to come back to us and also present himself in a sit in front of us. We're going to go through each step individually. So what I'd be looking for you guys is take each step at a time, and you're looking to have the dog successful about 3 to 5 times in a row before you move on to the next step. We're going to start off this in a non-distracting environment so your dog understands the mechanics and exactly what you want to do before we move on to a distracting environment like the park or the beach or other places you might bring your dog where they don't respond to you as well. And at the very end of this video, we will then go into how we will put in protocols to then start transferring, training the behavior of coming back to us into those different locations. Okay, so hang on till the end and we'll look at that. So part 1, teaching the dog to follow the lure towards you. Okay, so you're going to move backwards and it looks something like this. Teaching the dog to follow the food that's in your hand. Notice how I'm using a clicker to mark the exact moment I've released the food. You can also use a verbal marker like the word good. Part 2, adding in the sit behavior into the recall. Adding a sit into your recall. Notice how the dog follows the food in my hand. When I stop, my hand moves up and this cues the dog to sit. Part 3 is a collar touch or a harness touch. It's basically when your dog comes in front of us and presents, where they're going to touch the collar or the harness before we reinforce the dog. Now the reason for this is it's more like in a kind of an emergency kind of protocol we put in place in case there's something in the environment has made you get worried about your dog's welfare. And when your dog comes flying back to you because they've responded really well to the recall, you might go to grab the collar because you're panicking. If that happens, the dog might not be used to that and they might move backwards and run away, or they might think it's a game. So this just basically teaches our dog that when they come back to us, we're going to touch their collar before we give them that reinforcer. And it looks like this. Adding a collar or harness touch. Notice how my hand takes the collar from underneath the dog and I reward as I hold the collar. Part 4, adding in that verbal cue. For me, I like to keep my sound that I use my dog quite pitched, so it always sounds the same. Now I'll say it like this, come! So I don't have to shout, but it's going to be heard at a distance. And it always kind of sounds the same. I'm not really trying to attach any emotion to this cue. I'm trying to keep it as consistent as possible. But at the same time, I want it to be something that I can replicate exactly the same all the time. Adding the verbal cue. It's important to add the word before you give the dog any visual cue. This is because we want the dog to eventually respond to the verbal cue without needing the visual cue as well. Part 5. In this section, we're going to add in some distance. Adding distance. Again, watch how the verbal cue is given before any movement from my body. Part 6, proofing the verbal cue. Now for this section, guys, it could take you a couple of weeks, it might even take you a month to get to this point where you can proof the verbal cue alone. Okay, dogs' language is body language, so they're going to respond to visual cues much more. It takes time to get your verbal cues established really, really well and proof them then. So don't worry if your dog is taking a bit of time with this. It's totally, totally normal. I never expect a dog to respond to a verbal cue straight away. It just doesn't happen. It takes time, it takes repetition, it takes more repetition, and it takes even more repetition. 1, 2, 3, go. In this section, we are proofing the verbal cue. Notice how we've changed the reinforcer to a game of tug instead of food. The reason for this is Prince prefers tug over food. If we started using this reward in the beginning, it may have got the dog too excited, making it difficult to get the correct form. So you'll also notice we've changed the reinforcer now. We've gone on to what we call game. Now for me, moving on to a game for your recall, game of tug, and I kind of like a ball on a string, because if your dog is very into balls, I like to have it so the dog interacts with me when they come back. So game of tug is really important, and I'm going to do up a video about play soon, and as soon as I do, I'll link it in the description. But play, for me, it's probably one of the biggest reinforcers, and you can teach your dog to be into it. It doesn't have to be something that you say, oh, my dog's not into toys, into food. Not so. You can build up that game and you can work on it, and when you do, it becomes a really powerful tool, because it's not just a little piece of food they eat and it's gone. It becomes something that's lasting. You spend 30 seconds, I even spend a minute sometimes playing tug and reinforcing the dog coming back, because that builds up the energy and it builds up the dog flying back to you when they hear that sound. Part 7. So now we're going to add a little bit of fun. You can put this in as soon as you have the mechanics of the dog coming back to you and sitting and presenting themselves and the collar touch in place. You can add in this game anytime. We're using ourselves and our body as part of the game. So we're going to actually call the dog back, they present, and instead of feeding them from our hand, we're placing the food on the ground and then we're running away. And it's just building up a little bit of fun element to your dog. And it looks something like this. For this, we're using our movement as well as the food reward on the ground to encourage our dog to come back to us when they hear the verbal cue. By placing the food on the ground, it will engage the dog's nose, giving us time to move away from the dog. Before adding in this game, it's better to train steps 1 to 5, making sure your dog can respond to each part before moving on to the next one. As you said before, when you have all that in place, you're now in a position where you can start to move to different locations. Now, something I want you to be aware of, when you change locations, your 3Ds, when in dog training terms, they mean your duration, your distance, and your distraction, are really, really important when you're working with your dog. A couple of things you'll want to have in place before you move to these locations is control and management. We want to make sure that we're setting it up so our dog can respond to us, and our dog is going to be successful responding to us. So a couple of things you might want to get is our dog harness. Really, really happy. And the reason for that is because we're also probably going to want a long line or a training lead. Now these things are about 10 meters long. This one's actually for a horse. It's like a lunge line. You can get them in any kind of pet shop. These are great, invaluable tools. Okay. But the kind of kicker with this is when you're using that, I would only ever have it attached to the back of a dog harness. The reason for that is, guys, we're going to give the dog length and distance so the dog might pick up some speed, and the last thing we want is attached to the dog's collar where the dog might get a jolt on their neck. That's not what we want. We want this to be a really happy and fun experience for our dog. So harnesses, please, guys, if you're going to use a long line. You can also use your normal lead attached, but you're not going to have as much distance, but that's still fine because you can still use the lead in one hand and you can be moving back with your dog moving towards you. So you go back to the very beginning, and that's what you're going to do. Use a lead. So have fun, but then understand where you are training. So say your dog is really responsive everywhere, but is having trouble when there's other dogs around because your dog is a really social dog, and playing with dogs is really reinforcing for them. And this is a big one. So what you're going to do there is you're going to go back and you're going to think, okay, my 3Ds, what does that mean for me in this scenario? What it means is your dog finds it very hard to respond to any cue when there's other dogs in the environment. So that means we're going to have to teach a dog to be able to respond to our cue even when there's dogs in the environment. So what I'm going to first start off doing is I'm going to go far, far away from dogs. I don't want them too close. And I'm going to start training there where my dog can kind of notice they're there, but it's still far enough away, the distance is far enough from the distraction that the dog can respond to me. I'll start working there first, and I'll gradually get closer and closer to the dogs. But when I'm saying gradually getting closer, I'm talking over different sessions. I'm not looking at this straight away. I'm going to take my time. I'm going to build in a plan. What I also might do, if your dog is social and you know a place you can go and let them have a play, I might actually let the dogs play first. Very rarely do I train my dog before I've let them be free and have a run around anyway. So that might be for us. It might just mean we're going to the park. We've got our harness on. We've got a dog on our long line, and we're just walking around, letting the dog sniff around, let the dog enjoy the nature, let them habituate to the environment. And then maybe after 15 to 20 minutes, we'll say, okay, now I'm going to do a little bit of recall training. But what you're going to have is you're going to have those really, really high-end reinforcers for your dog. So say I'm using now a toy with my dog. This is one of Prince's favorite toys. When I'm using this is not something that Prince has every day himself. This is something that's mine. I bring it out whenever I want to play with him. It's under my rules. And this becomes very powerful then because the dog loves it and we've built up that game, but he doesn't get to play it very often. It's only when he hears the word come that he'll come flying back to me. We'll have a big game of tug. And if your dog's into food, try and break it down. What food is it? And whatever food it is, you have to use the food that your dog finds the most reinforcing. I'm talking the food that is the top of everything. When you find that food that's precious, don't give it to your dog for free. You're keeping that food for something like recall training. Don't look at it as you're not giving your dog things they want. You can give your dog these things, but they have to work for them. You're going to connect different cues with something really, really good happening for your dog. If you like this video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel right now. Just click the subscribe button below this video. Now over to you guys. What kind of training issues are you having with your dog? Please in the comment section, let us know what it is. And if we can, we will make a video tutorial on how to help you through that or help you to train your dog on something. Thanks for listening. And again, if you like this video and subscribe, you'd be doing us a massive favor. Thank you so much.